Hello, and welcome to another challenge brought to you by Trace Labs. Like our previous challenges, the point of this one is not to have something that's hard to complete. It's not to make you bang your head against your desk. The point of this challenge, like the challenges before it, is to reinforce some pretty core investigative principles and to turn you on to some things or an area of study that maybe you weren't familiar with. With that in mind, let's jump in. So earlier today, in the Trace Labs Discord, some joker by the name of Human Decoded, that's a dumb name, posted this challenge, and I'm going to walk you through how I would go about solving it. So it begins as a PGP signed message. This is a dark web challenge. The poster of this message has an account on Dread. Prove it. First 5 correct submissions receive a free ticket and bragging rights. And then here is the PGP signature. So, like any challenge, let's just start with what we do know. So we know that someone named Human Decoded posted this. We know it's a dark web challenge, so we know we're probably going to need a Tor browser. The poster of this message has an account on Dread. Well, Dread is a very popular site on the Tor network, kind of modeled after Reddit. If you've ever been on Dread, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, structurally, it shares a lot in common with Reddit. Okay. So we need to prove that the poster of this message has an account on Dread. So I'm guessing we're going to have to show what that account is and provide some proof as to why we're certain that the Dread account belongs to the poster of this challenge. Like any other investigation, the simplest place is normally the best place to start. So we know that someone with the handle Human Decoded, with this mugshot, posted this challenge. Simplest thing to do is to head over to Dread and see if Human Decoded actually has an account there. A lot of people reuse handles, they reuse passwords, they reuse emojis, they reuse catchphrases. This is a great place to start. Let's just go see if that handle even exists on Dread. So we're over here on Dread, and kind of right off the bat, if you've never been here before, you're probably getting some kind of Reddit vibes. You can see posts, you can see votes, you can see what appear to be subdreads, kind of analogous to subreddits. Okay, there's a lot of Reddit stuff going on here. And if you're familiar with Reddit, you know that you can access a Reddit user's profile by just simply reddit.com/u/user. Okay, let's just click on one of these users and see if that same structure holds true. Okay, there's the v3 onion address, .onion/u/handle. Okay, let's try Human Decoded the exact same way we saw it over on Discord and see if they do exist. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So now we've confirmed that the handle Human Decoded is a registered user on Dread. But we don't see a picture, so we can't like match that to the Discord profile or the Discord picture. They don't have any posts. They don't have any comments. And there's nothing else like here in the profile that jumps out as, hey, I can maybe link this back to that Discord account. Okay. So as we know from our ClearNet investigations, just because a handle exists on a platform doesn't mean that it belongs to the person that we're looking into. So just because Human Decoded is on Dread doesn't necessarily mean that it belongs to the human decoded that posted the challenge on Discord. So let's look around this profile and see if there's anything in here that we might be able to tie back to our poster of the challenge. One thing that jumps out at me is that if you'll remember back to the actual Discord posting, it was signed with the PGP key. On Dread, you can add a PGP key to your profile. It's actually how Dread does 2FA. And it also puts it out there in case people want to get in contact you and use that public key to encrypt a message to you. So this goes back to one of those fundamental lessons of an investigation. You have to understand the platform that you're interacting with. If you were brand new to Dread, maybe you wouldn't know what I just talked about. You know, if you were new to Facebook, if you're new to Twitter, new to Reddit, like there are going to be things you don't know, but you have to pick up on how the platform works and those eccentricities in order to exploit that into a way that is useful to your investigation. So let's see if Human Decoded has posted a public PGP key. Bingo. So now I think we're getting somewhere. Not only do we have a PGP signed message, we also have a public PGP key here on the profile. So what if there was a way to prove that the owner of this public key also signed this message? Okay. Well, we know for a fact here that ownership of this key has been verified by the user. So we know that Dread has done something to check that the private key that corresponds to this public key does belong to the owner of Human Decoded. They've done that check as part of their 2FA verification. So now we need to prove that the private key corresponding to this public key is the same key that signed this message. Okay, how do we do that? Well, whenever you're playing with PGP keys, or I'm going to say GPG as well, whenever you're playing with keys, it's always going to be a good idea to just throw them into a text file so you can start to play with them on the command line or maybe through a GUI app that you have. So I'm just going to create a couple text files. Challenge.txt, paste in our challenge. And then I'm going to go back to Dread, copy this public key block, and it's a convention whenever you're doing keys to have a .asc extension. Paste that in. Okay, so now I have a text file containing my challenge, and I have a text file containing that public key that we found on Human Decoded's Dread profile. Now what? Well, we have the Dread Human Decoded's public key. Let's just import that into our keyring and see if that gives us anything meaningful. It's totally safe to import public PGP keys into your keyring. It's not going to hurt anything. It just might pollute your keyring, and by pollute I mean it's going to be one more public key that you have in your keyring. So we're just going to import our Dread key, and you don't have to import a key to get information about it. For the sake of this challenge, it's going to be probably the most straightforward thing to do. Okay, so right off the bat, this gives us some information. It says, hey, I imported a public key allegedly belonging to Tom at humandecoded.io. Okay. Now, the thing with GPG keys is the email address is verified in no way at all. You can put whatever email you want when you're creating a public-private key pair. So it's interesting that now we have Mr. Human Decoded's email, but it's not really proof because it could be a lie. People on the internet are allowed to lie. It's rule number 1 of the internet. Okay. Let's have a look at this key a little bit deeper and see if the public key we found on Dread has any more information that we might be interested in. So in GPG, we can just list keys. And it's going to show us all the public keys in our keyring. In this case, I only have 1. Okay, here's a lot more information about this public key on Human Decoded's Dread profile. Okay, so we can see that here's kind of the big picture key, if you will. Here's that key's fingerprint, and this ID is just a shortened version of that. You can see right there. Okay, but then we have some sub keys, and if you're not familiar with GPG keys, this might be kind of strange, but it's not uncommon to have like specific sub keys for specific tasks, and then one master key that is sort of the certifier of those sub keys. So for example here, this is a signing key. This is that you would sign messages with. This is an encryption key that you would encrypt messages with. And then there's also an authentication key that you might use to, like, say, log in to SSH via GPG. Okay. So a lot more information here than we had previously. That's interesting. Okay. What now? This information is good, but we're still trying to prove that this key, or the owner of this private key, is the same one that signed our challenge. Again, simplest explanation is a great place to start. And GPG has a functionality called verify. You can just feed it a signed message, and with the verify option, it's going to tell you if that piece of text has been signed by any keys that are currently in your keyring. And oh my, it looks like it has. Okay, so let's unpack this because there are some warnings that are probably worth talking through, and there's a lot of stuff going on here. So it says that, okay, this signature was made using this key, again, allegedly belonging to Tom at humandecoded.io. Okay. And here's the primary key fingerprint and the sub-key fingerprint. So what GPG is telling us is that the owner of the public key from Dread, the one that we imported into our keyring, is the same person that signed our challenge. Now, if you don't want to take my word for it, let's dig into a couple different ways we can maybe prove this out a little bit further. If you're like, man, I don't really trust what Tom just did on GPG. So let's do this. So GPG is telling us that the challenge was signed with this GPG key ending in A8D. The public key that we imported and that we listed right here has a sub key ending in A8D. Okay. There you go. So this tells us that the key that signed our challenge is a sub key in the public key block that Human Decoded provided on their Dread profile. Gotcha. But if we want to explore this just a little bit further, if you're like, man, that sounds cool, but I really don't believe you, let's do this. What if we said GPG dash list key. Let's look at this key right here. So according to GPG, our challenge was signed by this key. If we list that key from our keyring, oops, you're going to want to ASCII armor this, or it's going to be not fun to read. Oh, excuse me, not ASCII armor. What am I thinking? Okay. So what I just did up here was I said, hey, just export just this key. And if you'll remember, this is the key that signed our challenge. And this block, this public key block right here that signed our challenge is the exact same as this public key block right here. And I'm misspeaking to a certain extent because the public key is not the one that did the signing. The private key is the one that did the signing. It's just saying that the public key corresponding to that private signing key is the exact same. So we now have evidence that the same private key that signed this message corresponds to the same private key associated with this public PGP block that Dread has verified. So we know that the Dread user u/human decoded has access to the same private key that signed our challenge. There you go. So this wasn't intended to be a crash course on GPG keys, but if you weren't familiar with them, it's a pretty interesting thing to learn. And the fundamentals of this challenge were pretty simple. Just how do you verify that two things correspond to one another? How do you verify that one account belongs to the same person as a different account? So start with what you know, what you have in front of you, and look for two common pieces of information that you can link together. So I hope you enjoyed this challenge. This was a lot of fun. GPG keys are really cool, and if you've spent any time on the dark web, you're probably already familiar with them. Thanks.